Xbox just admitted the dream is over. For years, the message was simple: the greatest value in gaming. For the price of a couple of coffees, you could access hundreds of titles, including the biggest blockbusters on the very day they launched. It was the Netflix of games, a promise that seemed too good to be true because, as it turns out, it was. Microsoft's recent radical restructuring of the Game Pass ecosystem isn't just a minor corporate adjustment, it is a public admission that the low-cost, high-reward buffet model is officially unsustainable. We have reached a breaking point where the math no longer makes sense for the titans of industry. Phil Spencer, the CEO of Microsoft Gaming and the charismatic architect of this subscription-first future, finds himself at the center of a storm. For years, Spencer was the hero of the consumer, championing a model that put players first. But the reality of 2024 is far grimmer than the optimistic projections of 2017. The recent price hikes across nearly every tier of the service, combined with the introduction of a new standard tier that stripped away the most valuable feature, day one releases, has left millions of subscribers feeling like the rug has been pulled from beneath them. This shift isn't just happening in a vacuum. It affects the entire global gaming market, from dedicated console players sitting in their living rooms to the massive community on PC Game Pass. What was once a unified, all-inclusive pass has become a fragmented and expensive maze of tiers and limitations. We are witnessing the end of the honeymoon phase. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The core of the problem lies in the skyrocketing costs of modern 8AA development. Creating a masterpiece like a new Halo or a sprawling RPG like Starfield now requires hundreds of millions of dollars and half a decade of work. When you combine those astronomical budgets with the realization that subscription growth has hit a massive plateau, the corporate panic becomes visible. Microsoft can no longer afford to subsidize your gaming habits with the infinite war chest of its parent company. The sheer scale of the Activision Blizzard deal changed everything. You don't spend $69 billion just to keep things as they are. That level of investment demands immediate and massive returns, and the old Game Pass model simply wasn't equipped to provide them. The buffet that Phil Spencer built was designed for a company trying to find its footing, not a corporate behemoth that now owns Call of Duty, Warcraft, and Candy Crush. The weight of those franchises has forced Microsoft's hand, leading to a restructuring that feels more like a penalty than a pivot. If we look back at the landscape in 2017, Game Pass was a revolutionary experiment. It was cheap, it was bold, and it was desperate to win over a fan base that had been burned by the launch of the Xbox One. If you were to look at a comparison graph between then and now, the trajectory is startling. In 2017, the value was a straight line of growth for the consumer. By 2024, that line has jaggedly spiked upward in cost, while the actual content access for the base tiers has plummeted. At first, it felt like the perfect deal, until it didn't. The transition from a customer acquisition phase to a profit extraction phase is always painful, but for Xbox, it feels like a fundamental betrayal of the brand identity they spent the last 7 years building. For the average gamer, the confusion is palpable. Do I want Game Pass Core, Standard, Ultimate? Each tier offers a little less than the one above it, creating a hierarchy of access that feels antithetical to the everyone plays mantra Xbox once touted. The transparency that once defined the brand has been replaced by the complex legalese of corporate tiering. The industry became addicted to the idea of infinite growth, but the console market is a finite pond. There are only so many people willing to pay monthly for a gaming library, and Xbox has likely found almost all of them now to satisfy the board of directors and justify the nearly $70 billion spent on acquisitions. They must squeeze more revenue out of the existing players. The value proposition has shifted from how much can we give you to how much can we take before you leave. This isn't just about a few extra dollars a month. It's about the soul of how we consume media. When the standard tier was announced, removing the day one promise for new subscribers, it signaled a retreat from the very thing that made Xbox unique. They are no longer trying to disrupt the market, they are trying to survive it. But the price hike isn't the biggest problem. There is a hidden reason why Microsoft is panicking, and it involves the biggest franchise in history. To understand how we arrived at this fractured reality, we must look back at the era of unbridled optimism that defined the brand between 2017 and 2021. This was the period where Xbox successfully rebranded itself as the most consumer-friendly company in the history of the medium. After the disastrous launch of the Xbox Xbox One, which was mired in controversy and a lack of clear vision, Phil Spencer stepped into the spotlight. He didn't just bring a new console, he brought a new philosophy. The narrative was clear. Microsoft was the benevolent giant willing to lose money today to earn your loyalty tomorrow. They tapped into a massive corporate war chest, fueled by the staggering profits of Microsoft's cloud and enterprise software divisions, to subsidize a gaming habit that seemed almost too affordable. It was a golden age where the value proposition felt like a gift from a friend, rather than a cold calculation from a boardroom. Every month brought new surprises, and the library swelled with titles that would have previously cost hundreds of dollars to own. For a few years, it seemed as though the traditional rules of business had been suspended in favor of the player. This was a classic market penetration strategy, often seen in Silicon Valley, but rare in the conservative world of console hardware. Just as Netflix had done in its early years, Xbox was burning through cash to gain market share, betting everything on the idea of a massive permanent subscriber base. They weren't just selling games, they were selling an ecosystem. The goal was to make the subscription so essential that players would never think of leaving. By offering major titles like Gears of War and Forza on day one, they effectively removed the barrier to entry for the average consumer. It felt like a revolution, a democratization of high-end entertainment that made the traditional $70 price tag look like an ancient relic. However, this aggressive expansion relied on a dangerous assumption, the idea of infinite growth. The industry became addicted to the quarterly numbers of signups, ignoring the reality that the pool of potential gamers was not endless. At the heart of this strategy were the heavy hitters, the titles meant to be the ultimate bait. The Halo and Starfield effect was designed to create massive spikes in membership. These games weren't just artistic endeavors, they were customer acquisition tools. When Halo Infinite launched its campaign on Game Pass, it was supposed to be the moment the floodgates opened. When Starfield was marketed as the ultimate space epic, it was the carrot dangled in front of millions of users to get them through the door. But while these games succeeded in bringing people into the ecosystem, they also highlighted a flaw in the model. A player could join for $10, finish the game in a month, and then disappear. The cost of producing these blockbusters was spiraling into the hundreds of millions of dollars, yet the revenue model remained static. Phil Spencer and his team were essentially building a digital skyscraper on a foundation made of temporary subscriptions. The day one promise was becoming its heaviest anchor. By 2023, the data began to paint a troubling picture. The console market is not an expanding universe. It is a crowded room with a fixed number of seats. Research shows that the total number of console players globally has hovered around the same 100 million mark for years. Xbox isn't finding new humans who have never held a controller. They are fighting Sony and Nintendo for the same group of enthusiasts. This saturation point meant that every new subscriber was becoming significantly more expensive to acquire. The Netflix of games dream was hitting the same wall that Netflix itself eventually hit, but with much higher stakes and a more volatile consumer base. The moment of clarity likely came when internal spreadsheets showed that even record-breaking engagement numbers weren't enough to cover development budgets. Phil Spencer had to face the reality that value wasn't a sustainable business plan when productions cost $300 million and take 6 years to complete. While Xbox was building this library, a massive debt was accumulating behind the scenes, and that debt is about to be paid by the players. The primary catalyst for this sudden shift from benevolence to cold calculation can be traced back to a single staggering number: $69 billion. When Microsoft finalized the acquisition of Activision Blizzard, it wasn't just the largest deal in gaming history. It was a fundamental reconfiguration of the company's financial gravity. This wasn't just about owning a few more characters. It was about securing the ultimate weapon in the attention economy, Call of Duty. However, the arrival of this juggernaut created an immediate and terrifying dilemma for Phil Spencer and the Xbox leadership. Call of Duty is one of the few remaining sure things in the industry, a franchise that consistently moves millions of units at full retail price every single November. By putting it on Game Pass on day one, Microsoft isn't just offering a perk, they are potentially cannibalizing billions of dollars in guaranteed direct sales. This is the heart of the internal chaos. They are stuck in a strategic vice where the very thing needed to save the subscription model, a massive culturally dominant franchise, is also the thing that costs them the most to give away. This tension birthed the messy reality of the new Game Pass standard tier. It was a tactical maneuver designed to solve a mathematical problem, but it ended up creating a branding nightmare. By stripping day one releases from the base console tier, Microsoft effectively admitted that the original promise was too expensive to keep. For the first time in years, the message from Xbox isn't everyone plays, but rather everyone pays, and some get less. This move has sent shockwaves through the community, turning the once simple subscription into a bureaucratic exercise of weighing features against costs. The standard tier exists not to offer choice, but to provide a psychological anchor that makes the more expensive Ultimate tier look like the only viable option. It is a calculated push to migrate the user base toward the highest possible monthly commitment, regardless of whether they actually need the extra features. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere at Xbox-owned studios has shifted from creative freedom to high-pressure scrutiny. Anonymous reports from within the organization suggest a growing sense of unease. Developers who were once told to focus on innovation and prestige are now being asked to justify their existence through engagement metrics that are notoriously difficult to satisfy. In a subscription-first environment, a game's success isn't measured by how many people loved it enough to buy it, but by how many hours they spent within its digital walls. This creates an invisible pressure to pad out experiences, leading to bloated game designs that prioritize retention over quality. The creative spark that once defined many of these legendary studios is being dimmed by the cold light of the hours played spreadsheet. If a game doesn't drive new signups or prevent churn, it is seen as a failure regardless of its critical acclaim. This is the new reality for the developers working under the Microsoft umbrella. The math behind this desperation is even more sobering when you look at the rising costs of user acquisition. In the early days, getting a new subscriber was relatively cheap. They were the low-hanging fruit of the gaming world. Today, the data suggests that it costs Microsoft more to convince a new person to join Game Pass than that person will pay in their entire first year of membership. To make the numbers work, Xbox needs every player to stay subscribed indefinitely, yet the sub and cancel behavior remains rampant. Players join for a month to play the latest blockbuster and leave before the second billing cycle begins. This churn is the silent killer of the subscription dream. When you break it down, the disparity is jarring. On a traditional $70 game sale, the developer and publisher see a significant immediate return on their investment. Within the Game Pass ecosystem, that same game is competing for a tiny slice of a monthly pool. A player might spend 50 hours in a title, but the revenue generated for that developer is measured in pennies per play. This isn't a sustainable ecosystem for high-budget niche AAA development. The numbers simply don't add up anymore. The sheer volume of content required to keep people paying every month is higher than the industry's ability to produce it profitably. As the budgets for these games continue to balloon, the gap between what a subscription provides and what a blockbuster costs grows wider every day. We are witnessing the collapse of an economic fantasy. If even Call of Duty can't save the current model, what happens to the smaller, creative games we love? The answer is terrifying. To understand why the mathematical foundation of Game Pass is beginning to crumble, one must look at the scale of modern AAA production. When Phil Spencer greenlights a massive project like Starfield, he is authorizing a financial project that will consume hundreds of millions of dollars over a lengthy development cycle. These titles frequently carry a production price tag between $200 and $300 million, excluding marketing budgets for global visibility. In a traditional retail environment, selling 10 million copies at $70 each creates a clear path to profitability. However, within the Game Pass ecosystem, that same game must serve as a gravity well, pulling in and retaining millions of new, permanent subscribers just to justify its existence. The internal math refuses to cooperate with this ambition. If a game costs $300 million to produce, and the average revenue per user remains stagnant, the volume of human beings required to sustain the model becomes unrealistic. This is further complicated by the phenomenon of churn. Gamers are a savvy demographic. A massive segment of the audience has adopted a sub and cancel lifestyle. They wait for a day one release, pay for a single month of service, exhaust the content, and immediately deactivate their accounts. This behavior turns the predictable recurring revenue Microsoft craves into a series of jagged spikes. It creates a situation where the most expensive content to produce is often consumed by the players paying the absolute minimum to access it. Microsoft's primary defense for the recent price hikes and tier restructuring has been the global reality of inflation. The cost of everything, from servers powering cloud gaming to the electricity running data centers, has surged. They point to rising salaries of engineering talent and the increased complexity of high-fidelity assets. While these arguments are grounded, they ring hollow to a consumer base sold on a revolution in affordability. For the player, the Netflix of games was supposed to be a hedge against rising costs, not a victim of them. This disconnect is where frustration boils over, as gamers realize the heavily subsidized golden era was a temporary marketing strategy rather than a permanent shift in the economy of play. In the background of Xbox's struggle, Sony's PlayStation division offers a stark contrast. While Microsoft bet on a subscription-first future, Sony remained committed to a premium sales-first model. Sony has maintained a revenue stream that allows for massive reinvestment without subscriber-dependent volatility. This traditional approach is winning the revenue war. When Sony releases a hit like Spider-Man 2, they see an immediate return on investment that is clean and independent of monthly retention metrics. Xbox, by comparison, is trying to build a fortress on shifting sands. The collateral damage of this mathematical failure extends beyond the walls of Microsoft's first-party studios. For years, indie developers viewed a Game Pass check as a vital lifeline, a guaranteed lump sum, but as Microsoft tightens its belt and shifts focus toward the massive overhead of the Activision Blizzard acquisition, those checks are getting smaller. The surplus cash that once flowed to experimental titles is being redirected to cover the debt of the new corporate structure. Independent creators are finding that the platform which once offered them a seat at the table is now more interested in the blockbusters that can move the needle on subscriber counts. The ultimate flaw in the comparison between Game Pass and Netflix lies in the nature of the media. It is a problem of production cycles versus consumption speed. A television series or a movie can be produced in a fraction of the time it takes to build a modern AAA game. The volume of content needed to satisfy a subscriber's appetite for video is manageable because the medium is passive. Gaming is active, demanding hundreds of hours of engagement. When it takes 5 years to build a product that a player can finish in a weekend, the math of a content-hungry subscription service is fundamentally broken. The cycle of creation cannot keep pace with consumption without an infinite pool of money. But as Xbox navigates this crisis and the industry watches the Netflix model falter, there is a third player in this game. This entity is doing the exact opposite of Microsoft, ignoring the subscription trend entirely, and it is making the chaos at Xbox look even worse by comparison. The psychological weight of this transition is perhaps more damaging than the financial one. For years, the Game Pass marketing machine focused on the sheer volume of its library. Over 400 games, the advertisements would boast, promising an endless frontier of entertainment. But as the golden era fades, subscribers are finding themselves paralyzed by choice fatigue. It is the digital equivalent of standing in front of a massive pantry and feeling like there is nothing to eat. This saturation does not breed engagement. It breeds a hollow kind of burnout. Players spend their limited evening hours scrolling through endless rows of thumbnails, downloading a game for 20 minutes, and then deleting it because the investment of time feels too high for a product they do not actually own. The friction of choice has turned a leisure activity into a digital chore. This burnout is the first sign that the deal has officially evaporated. The label of the best deal in gaming, which Xbox wore like a badge of honor, has lost its shine. It has become a marketing ghost that no longer matches the reality of a fragmented tier system. For the consumer, the math is no longer simple. You are now forced to navigate a labyrinth of subscriptions. Core, Standard, and Ultimate. Each level offers a different slice of the dream, but none feel as inclusive as the original promise. The community reaction reflects this growing resentment. On platforms like Reddit, the once unshakable Xbox loyalists are transforming into frustrated consumers. They are questioning the value proposition of an ecosystem that seems more interested in extracting revenue than providing a seamless experience. The repercussions of this shift extend to the physical hardware. This is the existential crisis Phil Spencer and his team must navigate. If the core of the Xbox identity is no longer tied to a specific piece of hardware, why should any person continue to invest in the console? By making Game Pass available on smart televisions and mobile phones, Microsoft is effectively telling its audience that the $500 box is an optional relic. This signals a potential shift toward what many industry analysts call the Sega route. By devaluing hardware to prioritize the subscription service, Xbox risks becoming a third-party publisher. This is a dangerous gamble. If hardware sales continue to drop because the subscription is everywhere, the entire ecosystem loses its gravity. Without a dedicated box, the brand becomes a mere icon on a competitor's screen. Beneath the surface of this hardware debate lies the even more troubling issue of the digital trap. We are moving toward a future where you own nothing, and even the rental is becoming unaffordable. In this new reality, buying a game is merely purchasing a temporary license that can be revoked or deleted at the whim of a corporate server. When the subscription model becomes the primary way to play, the very concept of a personal library begins to evaporate into the cloud. If Microsoft decides to delist a title, the games you spent dozens of hours in simply vanish. You do not possess these stories, you are merely visiting them at a price that keeps increasing. This creates a culture of transient experiences where the history of the medium is held hostage by licensing agreements. The digital library, once seen as a convenience, is now revealed as a cage. As the price of entry climbs, the sense of fatigue among the player base is reaching a breaking point. We are witnessing the end of the honeymoon phase between the platform holder and the player. The tension is escalating because there is no clear path back to the way things used to be. The industry is at a crossroads where digital convenience is colliding with the reality of corporate sustainability. Xbox has spent years convincing us that ownership was a relic of the past, but now that the subscription itself is becoming a luxury, players are left with nothing to hold on to. However, as the traditional model of the console and the subscription begins to fail, Xbox has a secret plan to pivot. It is not about the consoles anymore. It is about something much more invasive that will change the very DNA of what it means to be a gamer. The pivot begins with a concept that was once unthinkable in the premium console space: the integration of mandatory advertisements into the core gaming experience. Microsoft has already begun laying the groundwork for what many analysts are calling Game Pass Lite, a potential low-cost tier that trades player time for affordability. Recent patents and internal discussions leaked from within the tech giant suggest a future where the barrier to entry for the Xbox ecosystem is lowered to a handful of dollars, or perhaps even made free in exchange for the one thing modern corporations value more than direct currency: your undivided attention. In this hypothetical tier, players might be required to watch a 30-second commercial before a game loads, or endure sponsored breaks during their play sessions. It is a model that has already conquered the worlds of streaming video and mobile gaming, and Phil Spencer knows that the massive, untapped audience of casual gamers is far more likely to tolerate ads than a $20 monthly bill. This shift toward advertising is inextricably linked to the pivot away from local hardware. The $500 Xbox Series X is no longer the centerpiece of the corporate strategy. It is merely one of many portals, and increasingly, an optional one. The true goal is the absolute ubiquity of the Xbox app. By stripping away the need for expensive silicon and power-hungry graphics cards, Microsoft aims to put its entire library on every smart television, every budget tablet, and every smartphone on the planet. Cloud gaming is the vehicle for this expansion, turning the subscription into a platform-agnostic service that lives in the data center rather than the living room. However, this transition comes with a heavy price for the enthusiast. Cloud gaming, while convenient, introduces latency and image degradation that the purist finds intolerable. It turns a high-fidelity art form into a compressed stream, prioritizing the ease of access over the quality of the experience. Within this cloud-first future, the acquisition of Activision Blizzard takes on a new focus that goes beyond console exclusivity. While the public and regulators were obsessed with Call of Duty, the real jewel in the corporate crown for Microsoft's long-term survival was King, the creators of Candy Crush. To the boardrooms in Redmond, the mobile market represents a revenue stream that dwarfs the traditional console business. Mobile gaming is built on the foundation of microtransactions, psychological triggers, and high-velocity engagement. The integration of these mechanics into the Game Pass ecosystem is now inevitable. We are witnessing the birth of a hybrid model where the subscription fee is merely the cover charge. Once inside the gated garden, the player is met with a barrage of additional costs: early access fees to play a week before the general public, premium battle passes, and expansion packs that are intentionally excluded from the service. The subscription provides the access, but the monetization of the individual player provides the actual profit. This creates a fundamental clash between two irreconcilable viewpoints. From the corporate perspective, this evolution is a cold matter of survival. Industry analysts argue that the cost of developing modern games has reached reached a point of no return, where traditional sales and simple monthly subscriptions cannot sustain a trillion-dollar company's growth targets. They see a price floor for digital entertainment that must be maintained through diversified revenue streams. To them, ads and tiered access are not signs of greed, but necessary infrastructure for a sustainable business in an era of stagnating console sales. But from the player's view, this looks like the slow erosion of a beloved hobby. The sense of value that Phil Spencer spent years building is being dismantled piece by piece. The relationship is shifting from a community of fans to a database of users to be monetized at every possible digital touchpoint. As these new revenue streams become the standard, the very DNA of game design begins to change in ways that are difficult to reverse. When a game is designed to be played via a cloud stream or within an ad-supported tier, the mechanics often shift toward retention rather than completion. Developers are increasingly pressured to create experiences that keep players logged in for as long as possible, favoring endless live service loops over finite artistic narratives. The Game Pass check that once encouraged experimental indie developers to take risks is being replaced by internal metrics that reward the most addictive and repeatable qualities of the medium. This is where the shift becomes dangerous for the art form itself. We are moving toward a future where the artistic intent of a developer is secondary to the algorithmic requirements of the platform. The dream of a digital library is being replaced by a digital treadmill, and as we look toward the final horizon of this transition, the definition of what a video game even is has begun to blur. We entered the post-subscription era, a landscape where the promise of infinite value has been replaced by the pragmatism of corporate survival. For years, the gaming community lived in a state of subsidized luxury, enjoying a vast library of high-budget titles for the price of coffee. But as the curtain falls on this phase, we are forced to confront a reality where convenience is no longer cheap. The dream of a Netflix of games has split into a complex web of tiers, restrictions, and rising costs. The transition is not a change in pricing, it is a redefinition of the very value of play itself. In 5 years, Game Pass will not exist in the form we loved. The trajectory suggests a tiered ecosystem where subscription becomes synonymous with rental tiers. We are moving toward a future where the core experience is split between those who afford the premium entry point and those relegated to ad-supported delayed release outskirts. The removal of releases from the standard tier was not an adjustment. It was the first step in creating a permanent class system within the community. For the enthusiast, the cost of staying current will continue to climb, while the casual player will be nudged toward mobile-centric, high monetization experiences that prioritize microtransactions over narrative. This shift raises a question for the modern gamer. Is gaming becoming a luxury hobby once again? In the early days of the industry, high costs made video games an exclusive pastime. The rise of digital distribution and subscription models was supposed to democratize the medium, but the failure of AAA budgets has brought us back to the starting line. When a single subscription costs as several new games per year, and those games are designed to extract more money through battle passes and early access fees, the deal begins to look like a debt trap. The price floor has been raised, and the ceiling for quality is being suppressed by the need for constant engagement. As these models harden, the responsibility of preserving the medium falls back onto the players. Turmoil within Xbox serves as a reminder that the best way to support games is the traditional one, buying them directly. While the Game Pass check was a lifeline for indie developers during the growth years, Microsoft's belt tightening means those checks are getting smaller and harder to secure. By purchasing a game, a player sends a direct signal to the market that the art form has value beyond its utility as subscription filler. It is a vote for creative independence over algorithmic optimization. Leadership at Xbox navigated a path that took them from the brink of irrelevance to the center of the gaming conversation, only to find themselves trapped by growth. The acquisition of Activision Blizzard was the final piece of the puzzle, but it also became the weight that broke the model's back. The tension between being a consumer-friendly platform and a trillion-dollar corporate entity has reached its breaking point. Microsoft is no longer asking us to join a revolution. They are asking us to help them manage a crisis. So ask yourselves, is Game Pass still worth it, or has the dream reached its expiration date? The answer depends entirely on what you value in your entertainment. If you seek quantity and frictionless access, the tiered future may still hold some appeal, but if you value ownership of your library and the integrity of the developers who create these worlds, the subscription model is increasingly looking like a cage. The industry is at a crossroads, and decisions made by millions in the coming months will determine the shape of gaming for the next decade. Xbox admitted the breaking point was here. They have shown us their hand, revealing a future built on ads, mobile revenue, and tiered access. The era of the deal is over, replaced by an effort to monetize our attention. The choice is now yours. You can continue to pay for the convenience of a library you will never own, or you can return to a model that values the game as an end in itself. As the logo flickers and adjusts to this harsh light, remember that the true power has always rested in where you choose to spend your time and your money. The breaking point has arrived, and in this era, play is no longer a pastime, it is a premium.